Hello everybody, Draskyl here, doing a YouTube video, the first one in quite a long time. I believe we are in patch 7.29b. Don't quote me on that. Today we are going to be talking about what to look for in replays for people who may not be as familiar with watching replays as experienced players. Now, what do I mean by that? Oftentimes, you'll watch a game, and if you're a newcomer especially, there is information overload. There's a lot of things to take stock of. You need to know what abilities do, what items do, all this other stuff. So instead of doing the traditional, I'm going to talk about what this guy does and why, which is definitely helpful for some people. What I want to do is watch the game and kind of just talk about what I look for in a game. Because if you don't know what to look for, it's really hard to learn. So this video is going to be, I guess, learning how to learn. And we're not going to be super thorough. We're just going to take stock of things that happen within the game, and we're going to think about it and try to come to a conclusion that makes sense to us. So let's go ahead and hit play. For reference, we are watching Matumbaman right now, and he's going to be playing Terrorblade. I already know the outcome of this game, but it was close enough to where I thought there might be something good to take away. And I didn't watch this game, but I know who wins because I got it through Dota2ProTracker.com. If you guys don't use that website to find replays, it's a very good place to do so. So just looking at the enemy team, if you look at the heroes, they have an Invoker, they have a Phoenix, they have a Doom. If you don't know your hero matchups already, then you're not going to know that these heroes are traditionally pretty strong against Terrorblade, which is why I've also chosen this replay specifically. So we need to try to find out reasons why he's able to find success. And I just realized that I still had an overlay up that I want to get rid of. There we go. It's going to be a lot easier for the mini-map watchers. But it's fine. We didn't really miss anything. It's just the bounty rune spawning and such. So usually when I watch a game, the first thing that I look at is, you know, what items is he starting with? Like, what is his interpretation of the lane matchup? And in this case, he's against 2 melee. He's playing Terrorblade, so he has really high armor. And that more or less means he's just going to be able to farm. And having this kind of security in knowing that you're going to be able to walk to your lane and hit creeps is something that you'll gain over time. But whenever you see someone start with specific items, never assume that it's always correct to do that. Like, never assume that you can do that universally and it will always be good. There are very few situations where that's true. In this particular example, he has the Quelling, he's got Circlet, double branches, a set of tangos, and a salve. So he has bought a lot of regen. Now, why would he want to buy a lot of regen in a lane where he doesn't necessarily have to take that much harass if he doesn't want to? In my opinion, if you were playing this lane passively, you could probably just buy one set, maybe 2 sets of tangos, and not have to ever worry about anything else. So what's the point of the regen? I believe, personally, having not watched the game, that you buy this much regen because you want to play the lane as aggressive as possible. You can see that he's like auto-attacking, he's pushing out the wave. The enemy team has attempted to do a pull, and he's going to do a aggro toggle here. And if you don't know what aggro toggling is, we can go back and check it out really quick in slow motion so you guys can see what he actually does. So he's going to push out this lane. He probably also anticipates this pull, by the way. High-level players, they see this camp over here, that it's spawned, and it's really good to be able to push the lane out so you can contest this. This is just like a little piece of information that you can take into games. When you have the lane advantage and you're way stronger than your opponent, it's really nice to be able to push. So anyway, he sees this wave walking into the camp. What he's going to do is he's going to click on this guy, like right click, and that's going to issue an attack command. That attack command is going to cause all 4 of these creeps, hopefully, to just walk towards him and not towards the camp. And the way that creep aggro works is that if these creeps are not actively being attacked by another source, they won't chase because these creeps are done attacking and they're now leashed and walking back to the camp. So we're watching his perspective. His cursor is right here. He walks over to be in range. He clicks the Doom, and the creeps follow him, right? Now, this is more of a technical thing that you'll just gain over time the more you play. But it's a very, very, very useful mechanic to have. So this stuff is kind of subconscious to a high-level player. They just do this because they know it's the right thing to do. But if you don't know what it is, now you do. So now he's continuing to push. He's pulling the creeps back to deny his own range creep. And the whole philosophy here for him is that he knows he's powerful. He has sufficient matchup knowledge. This is something that is kind of hard to define for a lot of players because they don't have enough matches against certain heroes or a thorough understanding on enough heroes to really get it, right? But this is a pro level player. He's played tons of games. He understands, hey, my hero is just going to have a nice time in this lane. So he's still doing the same stuff. We'll open up the CS so we can get a clear depiction of how he's doing. He's 15 and 5 at 3 minutes. That's very good. 5 CS a minute for the first like 5 minutes or so is pretty good. And then after that point, as Terrorblade, he farms very fast. So we're going to see that number escalate very quickly once like the laning phase breaks down and stuff. The other thing to note in the early part of the game, especially for all you one players out there, is what on the enemy team is going to rotate to my side of the map. So if we just take a moment, you know, he's level 4, it's 3 minutes in, we're going to go to free camera here and we're going to check out the mid lane. Now, Matumbaman himself has not really looked at mid yet, which is fine. But this is something that you always want to look at when you are playing in the safe lane because it's very common that mid heroes or other like supports are going to be rotating towards you. So they have Spear Breaker, Phoenix as supports, and then they have an Invoker in the mid lane. If he already knows that this guy is Quas Wex, then he understands immediately that this guy is going to make a rotation towards him. So the general lesson is that once you know what hero is mid, you can make like a mental note of it and say, okay, this guy's going to try to come kill me at some point, right? Now, fortunately for Terrorblade, he's great at farming the jungle. So if he wants to leave the lane and go farm some neutral creeps to avoid the Invoker potentially coming down and killing him, you know, that's something he already knows before it happens. When you're playing Dota, since it's so information-driven, if you have the information before your opponent and you make the move first, you're normally at an advantage. So what I expect out of the Terrorblade this game, depending on how well the lane goes, is that he's going to be able to farm really well. He's going to occupy the safe places on the map and let his teammates play in front of him until he feels sufficiently strong to, you know, participate in fights. And if his team is playing super well, you might see him walk to random places on the map and hit Metamorphosis to pressure towers. You'll also notice that as of right now, he's level 4. And he's actually, I believe, yeah, he's holding skill points. So instead of putting 2 points into Metamorph for a fight, you would probably never skill more than 1 point into Reflection in the early game. So this one is like a little less weird that he just has one and not the other. But he's probably either A, deciding if he wants to go to the jungle and just put 2 points into the mirror image, which is the thing that you would traditionally use for farming really, really fast because it scales well and it doesn't cost a lot of mana. But if he finds a fight, having the points held, you see how he just skills his second point into meta right there because there's an engagement happening? And for the record, I do know the model is bugged out, but he skilled the second point into this and then realized that he didn't even need it to get the kill. So when you're holding skill points and you're a high-level player, it's usually because you think that something could happen that would change your decision-making beforehand. So obviously he's just incredibly strong right now, buys boots, pops meta. This might actually just be a kill too. Okay, it's going to be one hit short, but that's fine. But you can see the philosophy applied here in the moment. Like, he sees that there's potential for fight, and if the Lion is ever, like, to the side, over to the left where the pole camps are, and they go on him, it's easy to turn because he has a hero with a stun, he has a built-in slow, and he does a ton of physical damage. So holding the points ends up being, maybe not the most useful thing in this situation, but it's good to understand the logic behind it. Because there will be situations on some heroes, this is for any lane and any role, where holding the point could be the difference between you living or dying or killing a hero or not killing a hero. So far so good. He's having a really nice lane. Level 5 at 5 minutes is great for any safe lane. His farm is still really good. Comparative to the Void, the Terrorblade is having a significantly better lane. And Terrorblade farms real fast out of the laning phase as well. So if he gets ahead like this, he's probably just going to snowball out of control. Speaking of, so this is just a rotation from the Tusk. It looks like he misses his shard. This is something that you're going to see happen a lot. And I know this is kind of deviating a little bit away from the focus right here, which is Terrorblade. But if you're rotating to a lane, just taking into account how much mana and like what abilities your teammates have is a really good idea. If the shards landed, they might have killed the Doom anyway. But, you know, meta's on cooldown and stuff. So if you're playing a core and you have a cooldown, communicating that it's not up or whatever to your teammates can be very helpful. It means that the Tusk may or may not have rotated at all, right? So as the safe laner or anyone with long cooldowns, you typically want to communicate, hey, I don't have this, let's just chill. And then when it's up, we can do something. Now here, it doesn't hurt the Terrorblade's game at all. He's still farming, still feeling good. But it could very well backfire, right? You could bait somebody into a bad engagement. You could end up killing your carry on accident, you know, stuff like that. So it can be scary. Alright, so he goes for the full treads. He's going Wand, and he's going to go for the Raindrop. So at face value, Raindrop just provides nuke protection. 120 damage off any nuke that's over 50 damage, I believe. So if you hit between 51 and 120 damage, it just does nothing, which is really useful. It's got 6 charges, and then it also grants mana regen. I believe it's, I think it's 0.8. I think it got buffed at some point. So the mana regen is self-explanatory, right? He knows he wants to be in the woods. The hero already has a lot of armor. He's even got an extra salve. So if he wants to farm, the only thing he really needs to accomplish farming because of his base kit is mana. Now with the Raindrop, with tread swapping, there is a pretty good chance that he's never going to be too low on mana to fight, but if he does get to that point, he can just ferry out a Clarity and he'll just, you know, same thing. So when you're watching games like this, obviously we've talked about a lot already, you always want to try to think of, like, the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. So, you know, why does he buy the Raindrop? Well, he needs mana, and the hero doesn't have a lot of HP, so if he gets nuked, you know, it can end up saving his life. You know, why treads? Obvious again, it's attack speed. The illusions benefit from the attack speed and the stats. And then he can just sit in the woods, and since he's super high armor and pretty good regen, he can just farm indefinitely. There's nothing, so far in the first 7 minutes of the game, nothing has really held him down. And we kind of knew his lane was going to be easy going into it, and that's being showcased by him having 49 CS at 8 minutes. He's top of the net worth right now as well. And he gets a really solid item on Terrorblade, actually. Some of the neutrals in the early game can really change how quickly you farm. Chipped Vest is one of them because it reflects damage. And it also means you can protect your illusions, and the HP regen is more than enough to basically sustain you forever, as some heroes. In Terrorblade's case, he's got 17 armor now and 9 health regen, so unless he runs out of mana or someone tries to kill him, he never has to go home. His team's making some moves in the mid tower now. I always find it interesting to watch what carry players do in certain situations. So right now, he sees that his team is mid, right? He's level 7, he's farming. If we look at the map, we see that, hey, you know, Doom's level 6. So what influences his decision making here as to not go in? If we were to just look at him, he doesn't have Sunder. So he's not super strong in fights because he doesn't have the ability to swap health. He has got maxed illusions, and the Doom is bottom. Obviously, he can't know that this guy doesn't have Doom skilled. There's no way he knows this. So the information that he's given, he sees his tower being attacked. He sees the Doom walk into the tree line over here to farm, right? So one of the safer spots to be on the map in general is just on a high ground. And if you notice, every single like ramp up here is going uphill. So when he's farming this camp, he's basically saying, I can't contribute to this fight. And if I go down here, there is actually a probability that I get doomed. Like, it's a non-zero chance that I get doom pressed on me and I could potentially die. And as a safe laner, pretty much your only job is to not die before you have items. So this whole thing happens very quickly, by the way. He comes to this conclusion in like half a second just by looking. He looks at the map, he looks at where his team is, he takes account for what abilities he has, and he just goes, nah, I'm just gonna hit creeps. And it's correct, right? Because if he walks mid, even with meta, he doesn't have Sunder, he knows his team is already dying, he can't really do anything to that tower. He's even like playing it super passively around the Doom. He's waiting for his team to teleport. So now that the Mirana's here, he's feeling confident, and they can just kill the Doom for free. So with the meta, he's most likely thinking he just wants to push the lane. I think a lot of people would look at that metamorph usage and just go, you know, it was kind of unnecessary to pop it to kill him. But let's see what happens after he gets the kill. You can still see a lot of heroes on the map. And he's going to use the meta to just get damage on the tower. And this is also, like, it's okay. I wouldn't say it was the most efficient meta usage, but he is going to force another TP from the Doom. And he's still assuming that he has the ultimate ability skilled, which if you look at the top of the screen, we know that he doesn't. And he's just going to go back to hitting creeps. In a lot of games, it is very beneficial for the safe laner to sit on the bottom side of the map if they feel like they can hold it and not die. That's like a big caveat. If you are bottom and you're a safe laner and the off laner kills you, like in a 1v1 or if a +1 kills you very easily, usually considered too dangerous to stay in that area on the map, and then you kind of have to sacrifice your tier 1 tower. So whenever you're watching a replay and you're watching a carry's perspective, some games they're going to leave that tower to die, and some games they're going to just kind of hover around it and try to keep it alive as long as they can. And typically it's because the offlaner is weak or the mid player doesn't rotate, or some combination of the two. Some games you're going to have good matchups, some games you're going to have bad matchups. And again, that's the kind of thing that you learn over time. But his team is showing in Forest in the top lane, and he doesn't have meta. He still doesn't have Sunder. So he has made the distinction to himself that he can no longer occupy that space on the map. So because he doesn't feel safe there anymore, he pushes out another lane, knowing full well that the enemy team committed teleport scrolls and abilities to fighting in the top jungle. So he looks at it and he says, okay, we took a fight here, my team's pressuring a tier 1, I still don't have meta, I can't justify being bottom because I don't know if I will die to that guy. And as we mentioned before, dying is super bad. You really don't want to die, especially on heroes that farm quickly. Usually the carries that farm the fastest need the items to contribute to the game. So like your Terrorblades, your Svens, you know, Anti-Mage, all these heroes, the reason they have the ability to farm is because if they didn't, they just wouldn't be able to get items fast enough to be useful due to their kit being kind of lackluster. And Terrorblade is no exception to this, so. He's watching the top fight, he sees that the tower is dead, and he also watches the team kind of dies there, but again, it's not really, for his particular game, he's still not been dealt with. And I suppose we could take a second to talk about the items. He's going for the Diffusal Blade. Not wanting to take this to the late game, which makes sense. This one's a bit harder to explain to people who might not understand hero matchups that well. But let's just say it as the later the game goes for Radiant this time around, it's going to get harder. It's not going to get easier. So Diffusal allows you to pop meta. You can cast your reflection on them, double slow. It gives you a lot of agility anyway, which still increases your farm rate. And it gives you really, really good kill potential.
The Monster Jam!
So because he's really far ahead and because he has this aggressive item, I would expect that he's going to either pop a meta to push again or he's going to look for a fight. So they are moonlit right now. He's got really good positioning for this fight. Like, super, super good positioning. The Void has already used Chrono. And they're just gonna absolutely wipe him here. I mean, the Void doesn't die, but that was a very nice sequence from him. So let's go back and let's double check and see, because I wasn't looking closely enough. So the Chronosphere has been used on the Void, and it's on cooldown for some time. And in a real game, when you can hear the communication of your teammates, someone probably said, hey, let's smoke. As you can tell on the minimap right now, 4 of his allies are smoked. Chrono's down, let's make a play. So because Chrono's down, and he knows that, he has that information, he's going to try to connect with his team. He sees the Doom leaving, they're moonlighted right now, and he's just going to go in because he understands that, hey, there's only one spell that really threatens me here besides Doom, and it's on cooldown. I mean, heck, the Invoker was dead before he even got to the fight. So this connection nets him 2 kills. He gets the 3-player, he gets the 5, and they're also going to get a tower. This is the type of thing that experienced core players will do a lot, is they will be farming aggressively or pushing aggressively. This is more prevalent in the mid lane, by the way, because it's easier to connect to your teammates from mid than any other lane. Because the distance is the same, right? You're going from mid to top or mid to bottom. So when you are pushing mid out, it makes it really easy to just, you know, casually walk over like Matumbaman does in this game and just murder everybody because they don't have Chrono. So again, when you're watching cores, their movements always have a purpose. There's always a piece that you have to look for and say, oh yeah, he makes this move because they just don't have Chrono. So when you're watching games and you look at the ability cooldowns and you just go, okay, why does this play make sense? They don't have Chrono, their Invoker dies right away. Even if he gets doomed there, very low probability that he dies, right? Like, he gets doomed, but they have no CC. Alright, so the next item is Dragonlance. This is a super stat-efficient item. Very nice on Terrorblade, increases your attack range too when you pop Metamorphosis, so it's kind of a feel-good item. But it does give you a little bit of HP, gives you a little bit of damage. And right now, he understands all the ultimates are now up. So let's pause the game for a second and think about, like, just the general way that he's played the game. In the beginning, he was very strong, and he knew that he was strong, so he kind of, you know, he flexed on his lane. He's like, you know what? I shouldn't let you exist here. I'm just going to go in, I'm going to hit you guys, I'm going to force it, I'm going to hold my skill points so that if something does happen where I feel like I can contribute, I want to be able to contribute, right? Good mentality to have as a core, especially when you know you're going to win your lane. Then, as soon as the Doom hits 6, he rotates away from the lane, and he says, okay, if I have a teammate with me, I can stay. And if I don't have a teammate and the Doom is 6 and he hasn't used Doom on anybody else, I don't want to run the risk of dying, so I'm going to farm safely until something else happens to where I know I can leave. Then he sees that ultimates have been used on the enemy team that would otherwise prevent him from wanting to go to a fight. He builds an aggressive item because he doesn't want to go late game, and he pushes out mid so that when something does occur, he can make an easy connection to bottom when his team is smoked, and he kills a bunch of heroes. Everything that he's done so far in this game, by the way, that we're talking about, I promise you he has thought about in advance. None of this stuff, so far at least, has happened like in the moment. When he picked his hero, he probably already had an idea of what items he wanted to build before the first creep wave spawned. This is the kind of stuff that obviously repetition is going to help a lot with, understanding your hero matchups, you know, when you're strong, when you're weak. But the philosophy still remains the same. If you have a goal in mind in the game that you want to accomplish, like, what does my hero do? What does he need from the team, or what does my team need from me? If you can even have a basic question to ask, you're already going to be a leg up. And even when you're watching like replays and stuff, like, what is Matumbaman's interpretation of his hero this game? He doesn't want to get doomed. He doesn't want to get put in chrono. He wants to pop meta, and he wants to hit stuff. And then maybe on the side, it's like, Okay, he doesn't want to go late game either. So all these things are happening, like, in his mind very, very quickly. This is not, like... There wasn't a huge, you know, thinking session for him. This is kind of just like another day at the office, you know? It's just a pub game. High-level pub, albeit, but it is a pub. So he sees Chrono again. This time, the Chrono does not coincide with him having meta. He is making his way towards mid. I would be very surprised if he actually commits to this. At least not until his meta morphs back up. He might be able to get a kill or two, but we'll see. Yeah, like his Spirit Breaker has no mana. Enemy team's quite low as well. Okay, nice. The line positioning is going to cause him to get another kill.
The Monster Jam!
And right there, they just get 2 more kills. So why does this work? Let's look back, see what happens. The first thing, we saw them Chrono. We saw them Egg.
From downtown!
So, in this situation, let me be clear. I, as a player, watching this replay, know for a fact I would probably not have made this rotation. I know that I would have probably pushed top instead. And the reason I would have pushed top is because I would have seen all these heroes at very high health. I would have seen 2 people on my team dead, and me not have meta, and I would have come to the conclusion that maybe going to that fight is just not that good, right? That's how I would see it. Now, obviously, Matumbaman's way better than me, like, way better. So he sees that the enemy team, I mean, we're going to figure it out at the same time. Like, I'm going to be thinking it through the same time I'm talking to you about it. So I guess the way that he sees it is that the big scary spells are all dead. Like, they're all been used. The Invoker's dead. There's no Spirit Breaker ulti, there's no Chrono, there's no Egg, there's no Doom. There's literally no skills left. So what I gather from this is that he is much more aware of what the enemy team has committed to the fight than I would have been. Like, I would have seen Chrono, but I probably still would have hesitated because I didn't have meta. And maybe that just means, as a Terrorblade player, I'm less experienced than he is, and he understands, hey, we can just go, it's fine. They have nothing for me, right? So we learned that Matumbaman makes really good in-game decisions. He just goes, yep, I don't even need meta. I'm going to walk in, I'm just going to hit some guys, and it's going to be good. And it turns out that way. I think there's another thing to also, when looking at Dire's lineup, they are very cooldown driven, right? So if we were to add even more on top, we could say something like Chronosphere, Egg, and Doom all have very long cooldowns. So if you let the enemy team press those skills, get something out of it, and then you don't directly punish that move, then the state of the game gets worse for you. And killing them and going into Roche and getting the Aegis straight after the fact is just objectively a better outcome. It's a better outcome than I would have had if it was me and I stayed top and I hit the tower. Because what would happen is the map would reset, and then maybe the enemy team has their ultimates up to contest Roche. But he's like, nah, I'm just going to go kill them. And now that I have an Aegis in my inventory, the stuff that normally scares me no longer scares me. So just to sum this up, like, for myself and for you guys, he rotates towards mid. He makes a connection, understanding that they have no skills. And on top of that, he also knows if they win that fight, and he's obviously confident that they will because he's going there. I also get Roche, which removes the ability for the enemy team to have a win condition on the next engagement. Okay? So he's literally thinking that far ahead. He's not only saying, yeah, I can win this fight, but he's saying, not only do I win this fight, but we take Roche from you, and it is very crucial that they don't lose it, because now, as this kind of, you know, cooldown-oriented one-round team, they can no longer do that to remove him from the fight, because he'll respawn. So it's just like, this is the difference between, as for reference, I'm a low immortal player, so, you know, I know some stuff, but not obviously nearly as much as he knows. He's way better. He's just way better. But this is like the kind of stuff you can learn from watching a game. Like, it's just one game, and I've already understood, like, philosophically as a Terrorblade player, he's just 10 times better. He understands the hero limitations more. His itemization is different than mine would have been. You know, maybe our approaches to the game are just fundamentally different, and most likely that means mine is worse. But that's why we watch the replay, right? That's why we look at it and we try to come to a conclusion that makes sense so we can apply that to our own game. And if you think about it for a little while, I'm sure you can get something from basically any game if you were to watch it. Your own replays, you know, pro player replays. Obviously, this one is a high-level game, so we're looking at it from the perspective of a legitimate pro player on one of the best teams. But it's a good point of reference to have, like what types of things you're looking for, so that you can improve your own play. So the next item he's going for is BKB. It is still a game with an Invoker and a Phoenix in it, and these two heroes are usually considered to be quite strong against Terrorblade in general. And that's mainly due to the fact that Terrorblade has a very low health pool, first and foremost. His strength gain is abysmal, so he doesn't get a lot of HP. It's usually through his items where he gets tanky. And then there's also a lot of like crowd control effects, like Doom disables your abilities, you know, your cold snaps, tornadoes, deafening blast, stuff like that. And then you have Phoenix, which does pretty much all magic damage. And then laser on top of that is a percentage of your HP as damage per second. So no matter how much health you have in a game like this, you still have the chance to die because the Phoenix does percentage-based damage and there's just a lot of CC. So to him, he says, I don't want to risk it. I don't want to buy a Scotty. You know, I don't want to buy any of these stat-oriented items. I just want to make sure that I'm not going to die to, you know, one random spellcast, which is a very possible thing. And to me, his inventory is very aggressive. There is no, like, sit back and farm mentality with his inventory at all. It's just all go, go, go. So if we were to deduce the way that he sees the game from his inventory and how he's played, he does not want this game going into the later stages. Like, it's 19 minutes in, right? They've taken 2 tier 2s, they've killed Roshan, they've taken a lot of fights. His kill contribution is roughly, like, you know, little less than half his team's overall kills. So he's actually been doing a lot in addition to just hitting creeps. Take note, one players, you don't have to just hit creeps all the time. Sometimes it's actually better to go hit the enemy. So it looks like he's got his full BKB coming out, roughly about 20 minutes. Like, his item timings are very, very fast. We could take a look at his CS really quick to see. Yeah, he's 219 creeps, which is, you know, a little over 10 CS a minute. Very fast for most heroes. For Terrorblade, that's... like, to me, he's playing in a way where he's contributing a lot, not just in regards to how much farm he has, but being at fights and doing all that stuff. So to me, this is kind of, for Terrorblade levels, you can get more. But he's made the conscious decision to not do that because he wants to, as we mentioned, the game going later is very, very scary. So he's got his Aegis, he's got his BKB. I'm curious to see how they approach the high ground because this is usually the make or break for a lot of core players or just teams in general. They'll reach this stage where all the outer 2 towers are dead, and then they'll have some, like, sort of collapse on the high ground and the game gets really messy. So we'll see what happens. Apparently the Spirit Breaker is crazy. This is probably... It's not the time to talk about the enemy team's decision making, but usually when the enemy team has an Aegis and you're trying to defend a tier 2, let's just use the rule of thumb that that idea is just inherently not very good. Unless that they are showing heroes elsewhere that would imply that they are not 5. That tower defense almost never works. So he's almost 15. He's got his BKB, he's going Satanic next. I really like the option of having the lifesteal against heroes like Doom and like Void, Because if for whatever reason you don't die in the crowd control effects, like if you don't die in Chrono, if you get doomed, you can just turn around and hit with lifesteal anyway. You just shoot back up to full HP, and because the enemy team only has one round of spells to throw at you, they're out of gas, right? So if we were to make the connection logically, why Satanic is strong, it's because if you don't die in the burst, then you don't die at all. And you'll just heal back up, in like 2 or 3 hits, you'll be at full HP if you're in Metamorphosis and whatnot. And then you can just stand there and kill everybody, right? So in this scenario, obviously the enemy team is very cooldown driven. It won't always be like this. Now, Satanic is a great item on Terrorblade because you hit really hard and it gives you damage and it gives you lifesteal. But it might not always be the correct thing to buy. It just happens to be extremely good here because of the draft that the Dire team has. Some games you may not need lifesteal at all. But everything in his inventory right now has a very distinct purpose. And not only does it have a purpose, but he's used the items. And what do I mean by that? A lot of players build stuff, and then they play the game contrary to what their inventory would say that they should be doing. So what does that mean? It means, like, if you're playing an AM and you buy a Battle Fury, you probably shouldn't be team fighting with a Battle Fury and just brown boots, right? Because your inventory is saying, I need to hit more creeps. So this is like just a really obvious example, right? But for him, he bought a Diffusal. What did he do? He connected with his team. He found an engagement. He killed them. He bought a Dragon Lance. It's a comfort item. He's still fighting basically with his meta whenever there's an opportunity for it. They take that connection on the mid lane. He kills a bunch of heroes, even with his meta on cooldown, and then they get Roche. So his gameplay and his inventory are lining up. He didn't buy like a Manta and, you know, a Butterfly and just sit AFK and farm because in his eyes, going later is not good. So his inventory is a reflection of that. So whenever you're thinking about stuff that you want to buy or things that you want to do within the game, make sure that your inventory makes sense for what your plan is. And that's why it's important, like, ahead of time to understand when you see the enemy team and you see your team, if you can't say definitively whether or not your team is supposed to go late or, you know, whatever, then what you have to do is you have to gain more experience and watch more, like, replays and stuff of the hero that you play in situations that you're in to try to get a better understanding of it. Dota's obviously a super complex game, and it's very hard to just give you a one-size-fits-all sort of video on how to just be good at all of it. But there's always, when watching high-level players, there's always a good reason for something that they do. You just have to be able to make that connection.
Middle tower is under attack.
My pet thanks you.
And you can see his net worth too. He's 16.8k, minute 25. Like he's living life. He's having a great time. And right now, the way he's playing the map, you see how he's farming like behind his team, and he's never really crossing the river. It's because he understands that even with this inventory, he is actually very killable. A lot of people would get this inventory and think that they were just immortal, but that's really not the case. So he pops meta. He's very far away. Are they gonna get the egg here? There's actually a lot of misses, but they do end up getting it regardless. The other thing too that I would like to mention is that his whole team is more or less playing around Roshan. They're playing around Roshan because that is the way that they guarantee that the enemy team has no real comeback within the game. So if we were to break down the enemy lineup, what would we say about it? Their split pushing is pretty bad. They have some catch, but it does rely on them having vision beforehand, and they don't necessarily have the best heroes at providing vision for themselves, if that makes sense. Like, they need to see stuff, but they have a hard time seeing stuff. Sounds weird, but that's just kind of how their heroes are. So what would we not want to do against a team that has a hero like Spirit Breaker and two cores that kind of just own us, if we're being honest? Usually that means, like, showing in side lanes is really risky, because if you get charged, you could just very easily die. Like, if you think about it, a Spirit Breaker connects a charge on this Terrorblade, he might just be dead. Because he could get doomed, he could get chronoed. They have a lot of magic damage, like a lot. And if he doesn't get his BKB off, or, you know, they catch him with his pants down, he just dies. So even with his insane farm, and his super, like, strong hero within the game, he's still playing conservative when he doesn't have cooldowns. Because he respects, like, the amount of damage and the CC that the enemy team have. Tons of players would have this inventory at this stage in the game and just walk across the river, be out of position, get caught, die, and then lose Roche, right? And if that happens, the next fight is, like, automatically 10 times harder. Because you've removed the Aegis from the inventory as well from your Terrorblade, and you just can't do anything. Like, right now, he knows, hey, they have Egg, they have Chrono. I cannot be the guy who gets caught first. If it happens that way, then this ends up being just a situation where the game can literally be turned on its head. So let's see how he approaches this next fight. They land an arrow. Notice how he's still backing up, like he's not going in. He knows very well what kills him in this game. And the worst thing that you can do, as a carry player is get overconfident and feel like you can't die, and then you have that one whoops moment, and all of a sudden the game is completely different. And it happens constantly. Doesn't matter what bracket you're in, it happens. Even in these games it happens. Not as often, mind you, but it does happen.
Time is money.
Gets a nice little neutral item here. Next item's going to be Butterfly. Now, we haven't really looked too much at the enemy team's inventories, and there's already a lot of information in this video, so I don't want to, like, overwhelm people with the amount of stuff. But normally, itemization is what is my job in the game, and what lets me accomplish that job. A Terrorblade is kind of unique in that your inventory doesn't fluctuate all that much from a game-to-game basis. But some heroes, your items are going to be completely different. And it's also going to matter what the enemy team buys. So the reason we haven't really checked their inventories is because Terrorblade specifically just doesn't really... Like, if there's a Hex or a Blink Dagger on a hero with a stun, then sure, you do want to know about that. But in any decent game, or if you're playing with your friends, they're going to tell you. They're going to be like, hey, you know, there's a Sand King, he has a Blink, right? Just be aware of that. And then maybe your itemization changes based on that. So again, meta's down. He's not forcing the issue. He's just chilling, farming the enemy's side of the map. It's always a nice place to be when they can't leave their base. Now again, this is just kind of like a... I want to say it's a loose, kind of not super intricate replay analysis, more of just a... You know, why, you know, who, what, when, where, why sort of thing. But we could go into much more detail about, like, the laning phase and stuff if people were interested in mechanics like that. But this game is basically just, you know, we're watching Matumbaman learn how to learn. Watching him and trying to come to a decent understanding of why he does the things that he does. Alright, so his meta's going to be off cooldown. He's obviously wanting to walk up the hill here. He's got his Aegis still. At this point, I think he is more than willing to accept a Chrono. If they kill him here, he will lose his meta. But you can see how scared the enemy team is. So let's pause for a second. Obviously, they're going to get this Rax. So how did we get to this point, right? Like, what happened within the game that he's able to walk up this hill against a bunch of counters that, in my opinion, is actually pretty hard to play into, you know, especially if you're inexperienced. He never puts himself out of position. He's always very, very aware of the heroes that are going to kill him in the game. So if you're playing a safe laner and you see an enemy hero and you go, okay, this guy just kills me, then you know you need to avoid that guy. In this game, it's Void, and Doom specifically. Those are the two heroes that he's looking at and saying, if these guys get to me and they use their spells on me, I am very easy to kill. So his entire gameplay kind of revolves around what those heroes do, and then, you know, when their abilities are down, how do I react? And we saw one reaction in the bottom lane where he walked from mid to bottom after pushing out the wave, kind of mirroring his team's smoke movement to get a really good fight because they knew that Chrono was down. He kills 2 or 3 heroes, right? Really good rotation. And then after that, he gets another rotation from top lane. Even without the use of his meta, he's farming in the enemy jungle so he can make a quick little loop around to mid after he sees that the enemy team has once again expended all of their abilities. And then the same situation occurs towards the Roshan pit where he's just standing really far away. Makes it extremely hard for heroes like Void and Doom to commit without getting very heavily punished. And by the way, that fight that happened in middle where he didn't have meta, that also secures them Roshan. And the Roshan's important because the one-round teams they cannot afford to use skills on him, because if they do and he just comes back, they lose anyway, right? So he's made this mental connection, you know, in his brain, however you want to see it. I need to not get chronoed, I need to not get doomed, and then Roshan is important because it means if for whatever reason they do magically get a smoke on us and we're out of position, then I have like a get out of jail free card, and it also obviously takes it away from the enemy team. So we can just make like a simple checklist, right? Don't get chronoed, don't get doomed, kill Roshan when the enemy team has no abilities, and then the game, you know, it seems pretty easy. Now, obviously, he's a great player. One of the best carry players in the world. He's made this look quite easy, and we all know it's not, right? Like, let's be real. It's not. He's just really, really good at the game. So here we are, sitting mid with our second Aegis, pushing the middle racks, feeling pretty good about it. Void's doing a little bit of the Aghanim Shard shenanigans. He did go for the Chrono right there as well. He might even Satanic. Yeah, he knows this hero's limitations very, very well. He didn't even pop the lifesteal. He just BKB'd. Void didn't even end up popping his Chronosphere there. So I think at this point we can just say that the game is probably over. The enemy team has no buyback on Void. There's an Aegis Terrorblade. He's killing their whole base. Very, very nicely played by Matumbaman, of course. I think we've covered more or less everything that I kind of wanted to just gloss over. If you guys have any questions or comments about the game, you can just go ahead and post it. I'm going to actually have someone uploading content to my YouTube, hopefully regularly, by now. So if you want to give the channel a follow, that would be great. If not, I also stream on Twitch, just twitch.tv/Draskyl, same as the YouTube name. Very easy to find. Hope you guys found this video informative. It was pretty fun to make. Look forward to making more content for you guys soon. And we'll see you next time.